Hello. This presentation will focus on tense and aspect in English and specifically on the cues that help us learn tense and aspect. Specifically, we will be talking about a new teaching approach and we will see how this new approach has come about and how we can use the teaching materials. So, generally, grammars assume the existence of 12 tense aspect combinations. These arise from the combination of 3 tenses in red and 4 aspects in green, as you can see in the table here. On a grammatical approach, you would define the abstract meaning of each tense and each aspect separately. Tense is relatively easy. If I talk about something that happened yesterday, I would use a past tense. If I talk about something that will happen tomorrow, I will use a future tense. And if I talk about the now, I will use the present tense. Aspect can be explained the same way. The simple aspect is used to express a fact. The present aspect is for actions which are completed but retain some relevance to the present situation. The progressive aspect describes an event that takes place over a period of time. And present progressive is some sort of combination of both. Now, you can apply these concepts to unsuspected verbs, to any verb. It's a very economical approach. You won't even notice how terribly inadequate this solution is until you try to use it to teach English tense aspect system to foreign language learners of English. When you look at a sample of real usage, you see that those 12 cells aren't actually equally important. The present and the past simple together make up more than 80% of all examples in the British National Corpus. There is a clear Zipfian shape to the tense aspect usage distribution. The most frequently used tense aspect combination, the present simple and the past simple, arguably also express simple relations between event time, speech time, and reference time. In the present simple, event time, speech time, and reference time coincide. In the past simple, event time, reference time, and coincide and precede speech time. And we know that there is a relationship between length and complexity, with simpler things requiring less encoding. Other tense aspect combinations are more complex in their relationship they express between speech time, event time, and reference time. And each provide 5% or fewer of all examples. From a cognitive perspective, that is not surprising. Just think of the working memory load that the sequencing of these components imposes. A corpus-based approach that factors in actual usage yields much more useful results. Corpus linguists may use the same categories, but they stay close to relation between verbs and tense aspect markers. For example, Biber et al. Found that verbs that are most attracted to present denote mental and logical states such as know, mean, suppose, think, or tend. The verbs that occur the most in the past tense are verbs denoting events, especially speech acts such as say, reply, ask, announce. Biber et al. Also note relevant properties of the contents, for instance, that the past perfect is usually found with the time-marked verbials, and or in dependent clauses, for instance, the past perfect occurs with adverbials since then, so far, recently, or indicate another proposition, is the first time, reported out, remembered. The issue is, many people in the audience will be able to relate to this. And this is much more directly useful to learners, but it looks like madness. Within theoretical linguistic researchers who have considered this so-called lexical option have always tried to reduce the lexicon to a limited number of categories. Winkler had 4, Maslow had 20. But here we might have hundreds per cell. Do we simply memorize each individual item? Or is there some system to this madness? To understand how the use of the English 10 aspect system can be learned from exposure to usage and which indicators are important to use tense aspect correctly, we rely on insights from psychology, more specifically on models of learning, and we use the Rescola-Wagner model. In a nutshell, the Rescola-Wagner model is an error correction learning mechanism that defines how a system gradually learns to perform a task. Not just from the supportive evidence it receives, but also, and in particular, from the prediction error that it makes. If the cue is absent, then the outcome is due. Nothing happens. But if the cue is present and the outcome is present too, a relation forms. If, however, a cue is present and the outcome is not, then, after some initial excitement, things die down again. To model whether all tense aspect combinations are equally learnable from input and which cues would support each tense aspect combination, we trained our NTL computational model to make the learning experience of our model as natural as possible. We made sure it could learn from chunks. And these chunks are those n-grams that they can be from 1 to 4 words, and they were the 10,000 most frequent for each length retained. Let's see some examples. So 1 gram could be the past few years, days. 2 grams, the past few years, few days. 3 grams, for the past. 4 grams, the past few years, the past few months. The model then gradually learns to associate cues with specific tense aspect combinations, which are our outcomes. So let's look at the sentence, since then he has managed to remain the spiritual leader of his people. What would be cues and what would be outcomes? The n-grams we just talked about are the cues, as is the lexeme managed in green on the right. It would be unfair on the model to have to predict what the speaker is going to say, rather than only how they're going to say it. And the tense aspect labels at the top are the outcomes. So the algorithm gets a lot of information, but not the actual verb form has managed. The algorithm figures out which cues are good predictors for the outcome, given the way in which they co-occur, but it adjusts the strength of the ways of the relation given the error it makes in the processing of learning. We can see that the cue since then dislikes the present or past tense. The connection line is cool blue. But it loves the present perfect and the connection line is hot red. And once training on a large sample is complete, we can then go in and see whether the algorithm prefers the same tense aspect combination that the writer of the sentence originally used. In other words, where it would prefer the form has managed when shown the sentence at the bottom. So let's take a look under the hood and inspect the cues that drive our findings. We see that there is a clear split. Present simple and past simple are strongly supported by the lexical items themselves. These are verbs that are very strongly associated with present simple, such as thank you, suppose, hope, and with the past simple, such as he replied, she whispered, she smiled. Other 10 aspect combinations, such as present perfect but also future simple, are strongly driven by n-grams, such as already, since then, so far, but also chunks that refer to the future, such as hopefully. This will remind you of what corpus linguists found. We have long argued that linguists should stay closer to the data. This chart contains the distribution of each cue type, contextual n-grams versus lexical, in the top 100 cues for each tense aspect combination, based on the skewed naturalistic sample. When we look at the distribution of the cue types over the tense aspect combinations, we see that, relatively speaking, the present simple and past simple rely on lexical cues in bright pink, while the other tenses are supported by n-grams in other colors. This means that different tense aspect combinations are supported by different kinds of cues. That is, present simple and past simple are cued by the lexical verb itself, but other tense aspect combinations are heavily reliant on chunks of contextual elements. Frequency of occurrence and the Zipfian distribution of the tense aspect combinations in the input plays a crucial role in the cue outcome dynamics. Because our lexical inventory is finite, verbs will have to be repeated once the tense aspect combination becomes frequent. Tense aspect combination that occurs less often than the number of different verbs there is in the output are cued by n-grams. Tense aspect combinations that occur overwhelmingly more often than the number of different verbs there is in the input are cued by their own lexims. Frequently used tense aspect combinations such as present simple and past simple are instantiated by more than 3,000 different verb types, and those verb types are repeated many times, yielding 162,421 instances for the present simple and 131,899 instances for past simple. There is also a mid-layer of tense aspect combinations that have been between 1,000 and 1,500 types that are repeated 5 to 10 times. And there is also a bottom layer of rare tense aspect combinations where we are down to a few hundred types that each occur once or twice. So this brings us to the big question: do we actually have to teach all 12 tenses? And the answer is no. Mainly, we have to teach specific combinations of tense and aspect. And specifically, we need to teach present simple and past simple, which, as we saw before, they are the most frequently used tenses. Present perfect, past perfect, present progressive, past progressive, and future simple. So the teaching materials we have designed is a combination of videos and exercises with immediate feedback. And the sentences are approved corpus sentences and are flagged up as good usage illustrations by the model. And they include cues, and they can be used in class or as self-paced learning. They require at least a B1 proficiency level, and they have an engaging design. So let's see now how we can access these materials. So the first thing that we should do is we should go to the Out of Our Minds website and then click on Resources and then choose Teaching Materials for Teachers and Language Learners and then choose Learn Tense and Aspect in English. Then you will find a link to register your interest. You'll just need to write your name, your last name, your email address, and what kind of training you're interested in, and then press submit. When you do that, you will receive an email to access the platform, and this is the platform where you can do all of the exercises. And then you can start your learning. Let's see now an example of those videos. So you have access to some videos like this one.
So the present perfect, we'll start with the present and then move on to the past. Present perfect is usually found in contexts where you will have adverbs or specific adverbial phrases such as already, since then, ever, or so far. But it can also be also helpful to use other verbs that occur in the present perfect. And the most common verbs of the present perfect are actually verbs such as change, develop, or evolve. Let's have a look at some examples just with the adverbials for now. So first, we have already made some progress. Unfortunately, there have been a few more hurdles since then. You are the most contemptible individual I have ever encountered in my life. That is the one silly thing you have said so far. So the present perfect is usually found in the presence of these adverbials, and many instances of the present perfect will actually be compatible with one of these adverbs or adverbial phrases.
So, as you can see, that's an example of one of the videos that we have in the teaching materials, and they include examples and explanations of how these tenses or cues of the tenses can be used. So after watching the videos, you can go on and do the exercises. And for instance, this is an exercise on the adverbials of present perfect. And let's try the first one. So there is a sentence and we choose one adverbial. And you get immediate feedback if it is correct or incorrect, or the same applies, for instance, that's incorrect. And this is how all of the exercises are formed. Also, you can find all the exercises as PDF files to be used like that. And at the same time, there are also PDF files available with as answer keys. And this is how all of the teaching materials are structured. So you can see those links. So you can find the link to the UMI Out of Our Minds website, where you can find the teaching materials, the Languages for All website, which includes the activities, the YouTube, the Twitter or the X account, and the email. Thank you.